For thousands of years, the Oracle of Delphi was one of the strangest enigmas of the ancient world. Here it was believed the gods spoke, their words rising from a bubbling chasm in the rocks. But could there be a rational and scientific explanation for what has long been dismissed as legend?
There are ancient descriptions of gases. What gases could that be?
There's a fissure in the earth. There's a gas that comes out of it. It used to be strong, now it's weak. It's just a matter of science.
Using toxicology, chemistry, geology, and archaeology, two scientists have uncovered the mystery of the Oracle of Delphi. Thousands made the pilgrimage to this place. Philosophers and supplicants, merchants and kings, all climbed the steps of Delphi to the secret temple of Apollo, the place of prophecy.
In the heyday of the Oracle, in the 7th, 6th, 5th centuries BC, when this was the most important source of wisdom in the entire Greek world, where every major decision that was made was checked out by sending someone to Delphi to get the advice of the god. People came to ask the Oracle where to found a colony, when to start a war, who to choose as a leader.
It was a pilgrimage that began before the birth of Christ and continued into the modern age. Among its visitors today are American archaeologist John Hale and Dutch-born geologist Jelle de Boer. Although they arrived here separately, their paths crossed by chance in 1995. Together, they embarked upon an obsessive 7-year quest to discover the truth behind Delphi's powers.
I was excavating a Roman villa that, in the view of my colleagues and myself, might have been hit by an earthquake. And we heard that this geologist was in the area with a specialty of studying earthquake damage. We asked him to come look at our site. We were sharing a bottle of wine. We talked about other sites we'd visited. And he said to me, just in passing, "Well, John, you should have been with me when I went to Delphi in Greece. I saw the fault that runs under the Temple of Apollo."
And he said to me, you know, that's sort of fascinating, but still, are you sure that there are faults there? And I said, oh yeah, I can more or less prove geologically that there is a continuing fault below the site and that there might be many others as well.
And I was really glad to be able to tell him, Jelle, you're wrong about that. There is no fault under the Temple of Apollo at Delphi. Archaeologists have dug there and proved that that is a myth. He became very incensed. He asked me if I would know a fault if I saw one, and I had to confess I wouldn't. So it sort of rocked me back on my heels to be challenged in this way by a geologist on a subject that I had taken as gospel. And he was so confident and so sure about this fault that really shook me.
De Boer's theory contradicted the historical records of 1884, when French archaeologists first began excavating Delphi.
But when they first began to excavate, they started at the bottom of the slope, and they stripped away the modern, the medieval, the Byzantine, the Roman levels to get down to the classical levels of the sanctuary, the sacred way, the treasuries. They worked their way up the slope, and after just 2 or 3 seasons, they were up here onto the terrace of the temple.
It was the Temple of Apollo, which housed the famous Delphic oracle, that was expected to yield the greatest finds. It was here that the priestess, the Pythia, gave consultations to the most powerful men of the ancient world. 9 times a year, the Pythia was called upon to enter the deepest and most mysterious part of the temple, a chamber known as the Aditon, a place only the priestess was allowed. There she would enter a trance or divine frenzy, believed to be possessed by the god Apollo.
Only in the Aditon would she be able to prophesy. This woman can't give prophecies outside the temple, can't offer the voice of the god from the porch or from anywhere else in Delphi. It's only at that one spot that she is empowered to speak for the god.
According to the ancient chronicles, the Aditon contained an underground cave or chasm. From this chasm rose a spring carrying sacred vapors, infused with a sweet, unearthly scent. Was this, as the ancients believed, the source of the Pythia's prophetic power? In the spring of 1892, the answer was still buried under tons of earth, because the town of Castries had been built directly over the archaeological site.
Castries had to be bought house by house by the French school. The houses torn down, the people moved around the corner of the mountain to modern Delphi. They had found the foundations of the temple in the cellars of the old houses, so they knew just where to look. And as they stripped off the houses, this great temple platform came into view.
In 1894, they began digging into the Aditon, but the excavation pit kept filling with water. It wasn't until 1913 that the archaeologists were finally able to penetrate the bedrock.
They expected to find a big cleft in the rock. They expected to find intoxicating vapors pouring out of it, and they expected to find this spring or fountain inside the temple. They were very disappointed in what they found. It was just a dirt floor.
News that the famous chamber was empty traveled quickly.
There was no chasm, no exhalation of gas, no spring in the temple, and this statement found its way into the scholarly literature. Everybody learned that that was part of the evidence for saying none of the ancient sources were true.
With this conclusion, the once mighty oracle was relegated to the realm of mythology and fiction.
It was just a matter of the Pythia inducing her own trance, or perhaps even that it was all a fraud, that the priests and the Pythia were in on a game of milking money from the public with these oracles, but that there wasn't any genuine belief. Once the new skeptical attitude towards Delphi and the traditions about the oracle took hold, people's attitudes changed towards those ancient texts, toward ancient writing about religion in general, and toward ancient writing about Greek science.
But almost 100 years later, Jelle de Boer examined the original archaeological record and found a clue that had been missed.
Most of the archaeologists thought that they would find below the temple was first a big cavity. And of course they didn't find a big cavity. But the Greek word for cave can be translated in different ways.
What had de Boer found in the mountains around Delphi? And what secrets would it reveal? To find out more, he would have to recruit scientists from other specialities and subject the stones and waters of Delphi to the latest technology and tests. His results rocked the scientific world and rewrote the history of one of the world's most sacred sites. In the spring of 1996, archaeologist John Hale and geologist Jelle de Boer began searching the rocky hills around Delphi, once the center of prophecy for the ancient world. It was here, nearly a decade before, that de Boer had found evidence of the fissure that may have been responsible for the legendary oracle. Together, they hoped to document the presence of a fault line, a find that would contradict all the accepted scientific evidence about this mysterious site.
He kept saying, but anybody can see it. Anybody can see that. Anyone who goes to the site with even a little geological training could see this is a very active area, and there's a fault that goes right through the area of the sanctuary.
Well, it took me about a week or so to convince him. He's a very critical fellow, but I managed.
And I then had to turn the tables on him and try to convince him that if he had seen what he claimed he'd seen, he had made a major discovery. That this would be a matter of great importance to anyone studying the ancient Greek world and religion and Delphi in particular, and that we should go back there and try to document this.
With Hale, de Boer retraced the steps he first took in 1985.
Well, I came here in the 80s when I was working for the Greek government, who were interested in having nuclear plants on Greek territory. Now, obviously, in a country that has a lot of earthquakes and volcanoes, that is a very, very dangerous thing to have. And so they wanted to make very sure that where they planned to have eventual nuclear plants, there was no seismic activity. That's to say, there were no earthquakes.
It was while surveying the area that de Boer spotted a road crew widening the road.
They had excavated part of the road and they had exposed a beautiful fault plane. And I thought to myself, hey, this is sort of interesting because I see evidence for a fault to the west of Delphi and I see evidence for a fault to the east of Delphi. Logically, they should be one and the same fault. All I have to do is sort of trace one east and the other one west and hope that they can connect. And I did that.
De Boer hiked for miles, tracking the fault line. Satellite photos later confirmed his suspicions.
Once you have the help of the satellite maps, it's very, very clear that this fault continues all the way east, below the town of Delphi, from very below the Oracle site, and then continues all the way to Percora.
The presence of the fault line corresponded with the earliest known accounts of the powers of the Oracle, dating back 1,700 years before the birth of Christ.
Surface.
It was this common phenomenon the French archaeologists might have missed.
They found just one layer of clay after the other and one layer of rock debris after the other, and they became quite disappointed and they dug deeper and deeper into it, and then they said there is no big cave. But the Greek word for cave can be translated in different ways. It can also be a fracture or a vein or something like that.
To confirm his suspicions, de Boer re-examined the original photographs taken by the excavation team.
And so I went over those photos and I saw that in those layers, actually offsetting some of those layers, were cracks that were probably not more than ½ an inch to an inch wide. And they sort of ignored those as insignificant cracks, they call them, that were running through there. And that's, of course, the most perfect fracture that you can have for water to rise up and for gases to rise up.
But what kind of gas could have caused the trances, the frenzy, and the prophecy so long associated with the Oracle? If a chemical culprit could be found, science would come one step closer to solving this ancient riddle.